If you were to ask most fans of the Megami Tensei series what makes it great, most of them will probably tell you it's either the story or the gameplay. But one of my favorite aspects about the series that I don't think it gets enough recognition for is the monsters that you use. Whether you're playing Persona, Mainline, or any other spin-off, these games all have one thing in common, and that's the compendium of monsters in every game. With the explosion of monster collecting games in the late 90s and early 2000s, most people seem to forget that the genre owes its very existence to the Megami Tensei series. Shin Megami Tensei has a roster made up of hundreds of demons based on ancient gods, angels, demons, and other creatures from various mythologies throughout history. I remember when I played Persona 3 as a kid, I was originally drawn in by the anime aesthetic and dating sim elements, but after playing it, I quickly began to appreciate it not just for that, but also for the combat and the personas. It was almost like Pokemon in a way. I had hundreds of personas to choose from, but unlike Pokemon, these monsters were real mythological figures, and I would spend hours on the Megami Tensei wiki reading all about them. I wasn't just playing a game, I was getting a history lesson too. Many of these demons are staples in every game in the series, but some have only appeared once or a few times, then forgotten, never to be used again. In my dozens of hours browsing the Megami Tensei wiki, I've actually discovered that there are a lot of really cool demons that haven't appeared in any Megaton games in more than a decade. And that's exactly what I'm here to talk about. These are some of my favorite demon designs that need to come back for future games. Just to get a few things out of the way before I start, I'm mostly going to be looking at demons that originated in mainline games, and this is also not a countdown, this is just an unordered list. Without further ado, let's get on with the video. I'm gonna start out by mentioning demons based on creatures that everyone should be familiar with. You know, monsters from popular mythologies and folklore, like elf, dark elf, hobgoblin, giant, and kraken, for example. You know, most of us in the Western world know what these things are, since a lot of them are staples in the high fantasy genre. And then there's also demons for, you know, broadly defined dragons and dragon-like creatures, like wyvern, wyrm, serpent, and worm. Now, these aren't specifically named creatures like most SMT demons. Instead, they're just generic monsters of the species they're named. Now, I think the reason they haven't included these is because there are other, like, actual named demons that fall into some of these categories. But at the same time, that could be said of other demons too, like ogre and dwarf, for example, or also pixie, who's been a staple in pretty much every game. I don't think it's all that important that these demons be included in future games, but it'd be a nice little addition for some of the neutral races. But now let's get into some actual demons, the demons of Judeo-Christianity, or more specifically, the demons of the Fallen race, which in most cases are from the Lesser Key of Solomon. Some examples are Andros, Cetri, Floretti, Gap, Leonard, Paimon. There are a lot of Fallens that I think should come back. Now, I know the Fallen race has way too many demons already, but still, we've been seeing the same Fallens in almost every game, so I don't think anyone would mind if they removed, you know, some of the crappier Fallens in favor of these, or maybe make a new race, since there's so many demons in Judeo-Christianity. Maybe, like, make a race for demons of Judeo-Christianity that aren't from the Lesser Key of Solomon, and then that'll open up some room for the Fallen race for demons that are. But even if they don't want to include these, there is one demon from the Goetta that I think stands out from the rest of these. Baal. No, not that Baal, this Baal. When most people think of Baal, they think of the Philistine god Baal, but this Baal is a demon from the Lesser Key of Solomon, and sometimes considered one of the 7 princes of hell. Like most demons based on the Goetic spirits, Baal is pretty faithful to his original depiction, which comes from the Dictionary Infernal, and you know, say what you want about this design, but I think this whole spider, cat, frog, and human thing is pretty scary looking. There's definitely a lot of material to work with this demon, but for some reason his only appearance with this design is in Shin Megami Tensei 1, although he does kinda make a cameo in Devil Survivor, where he's one of the demons that's been absorbed by Belberith. He also has a design in Shin Megami Tensei 2, but we don't talk about that one. If they wanted to include him in the story, there's definitely a lot they could do with him. In Foreign Apocalypse, we had Baal and Beelzebub tied together since they're both from the same pantheon, so I'm sure they could somehow fit this Baal in there if they wanted. In fact, speaking of Baal, here's another Philistine god that some of you might have heard of, Dagon. So, one thing that most people don't know about the Philistine religion is that Baal is actually not the head god. That role belongs to Dagon. Dagon is the god of grain and agriculture, and sometimes misinterpreted as a fish god. However, what makes his design in SMT interesting is the fact that it's actually based on H.P. Lovecraft's Dagon. Yeah, you all know how much I love H.P. Lovecraft. In the Lovecraft mythos, Dagon is one of the great old ones, the husband of Hydra and the god of the deep ones, and it's clear that Dagon's design in SMT was inspired by Lovecraft's version of Dagon. Now, if they were to bring back Dagon for the next game, there's a lot they could do with him. He would be perfect for Persona 5 The Royal if the theories about Nyarlathotep returning are true, and he would also make an excellent boss in SMT 5 for a side quest about the Philistine gods. So, getting back on the topic of actual demons, most of the big bad demons from Christianity are represented pretty well in Megami Tensei, but there is one that for some reason hasn't had much representation in the franchise at all, and that demon is Leviathan. Well, we may not have Leviathan, but there is one that we do have, Rahab. This is a little more obscure of a figure that most of you probably don't know about. Rahab is a sea monster from Judeo-Christian lore described in the Book of Job as ruler of the children of pride. He's often compared to Leviathan, as they're both demonic sea monsters, but the funny thing is, Leviathan has never actually appeared in a mainline SMT game. But because of their similarities, I think Rahab would make an excellent substitute for him. I mean, look at him. Look at this design. Imagine having this guy on your team or as a persona. Unfortunately, the only games Rahab has appeared in are Shin Megami Tensei 2 and If, and Demi-Kids if you count it. Now, they could bring back Rahab as either a high-level member of the Tyrant or the Drake race, but honestly, I'm okay with whatever they decide to go with, as long as he's in there. The thing about Rahab is that there's not much known about him aside from his few mentions in the Bible, but these are the makers of Megami Tensei we're talking about, so there's a lot of room for creativity if they wanted to give Rahab a story role, even though I'd still be okay with just having him as a summonable demon. Well, that's about it for Judeo-Christian demons, so here's one from Zoroastrianism that you might remember from Nocturne, Ahriman. He's the great opposer of the god Ahura Mazda, basically the Zoroastrian equivalent of Satan in Christianity, but in Nocturne, Ahriman is the demonic sponsor of Hikawa's reason, and Nocturne is the only game that this design has appeared in, so that might be the reason he hasn't appeared in any other games, but I feel Zoroastrianism is a pretty underrepresented religion in Megami Tensei, which is kind of a shame considering how similar it is to Christianity, which is the most represented religion in the series. If Atlus wants to give Zoroastrianism more representation, which I think they should, Ahriman is a no-brainer. Here's another game-specific demon that most of you probably don't remember, Adam Kadmon. Who is Adam Kadmon? And no, it's not just another name for Adam. Adam Kadmon in the Kabbalah is essentially the prototype of Adam in spiritual form, the perfect man made by God. But unlike Adam of Eden, the human Adam, Adam Kadmon doesn't exist in the material world. He's not corrupt by earthly matter like the physical Adam. I don't even completely understand Adam Kadmon myself. I got a whole bunch of different answers from who he is, and I'm mainly going by his article in the Jewish Encyclopedia. Either way though, with a figure like Adam Kadmon, there's definitely a lot of potential for a demon in terms of both gameplay and story. However, the only game that Adam Kadmon has appeared in is SMT 9. For demons like Adam Kadmon and Ahriman, I don't know if Atlus doesn't want to bring them back because of the fact that they're game-specific, but it's not like game-specific demons haven't been brought to other games before, like Maria for example, who was also exclusive to SMT 9 before she got added to Strange Journey Redux. And while I'm on the topic of godly figures, let's not forget the Judeo-Christian Angels of SMT. Some examples include Safkiel, Kamael, Raguel, and Ophanim. These are all angels in Judeo-Christian lore that haven't had a lot of representation, and honestly, I'd be okay with giving some of the other angels a break, especially since I think these designs are a lot better than some of the ones that we normally get. Ophanim especially because, I mean, look at him. Talk about being creative with designs. Moving on, let's now talk about some demons that aren't so much inspired by mythology, they're more inspired by characters from movies, like Audrey. Anyone that's well-versed in cinema should know who Audrey is, but if you don't, he's a giant sentient man-eating plant from the 1986 movie Little Shop of Horrors, or as he proclaims in the movie, a mean green mother from outer space. Some other movie-based demons are Chris the Car, who is based on Christine, another 80s movie, Beetlejuice from Tim Burton's Beetlejuice, which I also thought was really creative making him a fallen. Oh, and Franken, right out of the Hammer horror films. Now, I can kind of understand why they wouldn't include these designs in any more games due to possible copyright reasons, but you could also say the same about a bunch of other demons in the series that have been reoccurring. I mean, if copyright is the issue, just change the palette or something and slightly alter their names, and there you go. Most of us will still know who they're supposed to be. And before I move on, here's one that's semi-based on a movie character, Terminator. I see this design all the time in examples of how great Kaneko's artwork is, and I've even seen it in a few memes. As his name suggests, he's inspired by the T-800 from the Terminator series, which is actually kind of funny to talk about since that thing has been appearing in pretty much every other game this year. Anyway, Terminator has only appeared in Shin Megami Tensei 2, where he's a member of the Messian race, which is enemy only. Unless Shin Megami Tensei 5 was planning to bring back the Messian cult, it probably wouldn't fit into the context of the game, and I imagine that's the reason he hasn't appeared in any later games, but I don't think that's an excuse not to bring him back. I mean, this design is just too awesome not to use. I mean, look at him. He's a Christian Templar knight with a jetpack, holding an AR-15 and a SPAS-12. Speaking of Crusaders, here are some demons based on real historical figures, starting with, well, Crusader. He's one of the most obscure demons in the entire series, and the only game that he's ever appeared in the entire franchise is in the PC Engine version of Shin Megami Tensei 1. In this version, he appears as a level 60 member of the Tenma race, but according to the Megami Tensei wiki, he was apparently supposed to be a fiend, which I think would have been awesome. Now, there are a lot of other demons based on historical figures, some of which come back as famed demons in SMT4, but there are a couple that they've left out, like Saladin, who was the leader of the Muslim army against the Crusades, and Nagasune Hiko, who was the chieftain of the ancient Yamato. Well, so far in the video, we've talked about demons based on demons, angels, gods, and historical figures. But then there's those demons that aren't really based on any living things at all. They're more based on human creations. And one of my favorites of those being Orgon Ghost. What is Orgon Ghost? Well, it's based on Orgon Energy. For those of you that don't know, Orgon Energy is a pseudoscientific fringe theory created by William Reich. It's a hypothetical life force in the universe, and it's believed that there are these things called Orgon accumulators that can gather this energy, and it can be used to do things like improve your health or control the weather. Yeah, pretty ridiculous, and it's been debunked multiple times, yet many people still believe it. Well, whether Orgon Energy is real or not, I think it's cool that SMT has an entire demon based on this sort of thing. It's definitely one of the most creative designs in this series, but what I like the most about Orgon Ghost is that his design is based on The Face of War by Salvador Dali. That's this freaky painting that you might have seen somewhere. Another one is Iron Maiden. Now, I'm pretty sure we all know what Iron Maidens are, but what most people believe about them is actually incorrect. They're thought to have been used in the Middle Ages, but there's actually not a lot of evidence about them being used at all. Everyone believes that people in the Middle Ages were uncivilized, and because of that, in the 1800s, these things started appearing in museums all over the place. Either way, though, I think something like an Iron Maiden is great source material for a demon. Unfortunately, Iron Maiden has only appeared in SMT2. And there is one more demon in this category that I want to come back. Shadow. And I'm not talking about the shadows in Persona. Well, I actually kinda am, but this shadow is a demon. So, according to Carl Jung, shadow is the unconscious mind, which is where people keep their repressed feelings. Sound familiar? That's what the shadows in Persona 4 are based on. When most people think of Shadow in SMT, they think of the one in Nocturne, but my favorite design is the one from Soul Hackers. It's a perfect representation of what Shadow is supposed to be. I don't see them adding Shadow in Persona for obvious reasons, but I can definitely see them adding it in mainline. Using what is basically the shadows from Persona 4 in a mainline game would be pretty awesome. Well, we are just about done, but before I wrap things up, there is one more demon that I think absolutely needs to be in an upcoming game. One that you should all be familiar with. I saved the best for last. This demon is Cthulhu. Cthulhu, as we all know, is a great old one from the Lovecraft mythos. He's depicted as a really big, ugly monster with tentacles. With all the influence that the Megaton series, especially Persona, takes on the works of H.P. Lovecraft, it's hard to believe that the most iconic figure from his works has hardly appeared in any of the games, especially when he has such an awesome design. Kaneko's depiction of Cthulhu is pretty accurate to how he's described in Lovecraft's works. A giant ugly monster with tentacles and a tongue thing. Okay, that's actually not in H.P. Lovecraft's works, but this is Kaneko we're talking about, so is anyone really surprised? And I think we all know why he designed him like this. Either way, this design is cool, and he's one of the most important figures in the Lovecraft mythos. But for some reason, Cthulhu has only appeared in Shin Megami Tensei 2 and If, although he did appear in the PSP version of Persona 2 Eternal Punishment, but we're still waiting on that, and you can't even use him as a Persona. I'm guessing the reason they haven't brought him back is because of the thing I mentioned earlier, which I can't show. But we already have Mara, we have Mishiguchi, we have Diana, Master Therion, Auriok. If we can get these guys, there's no reason we can't handle a giant octopus with a sausage for a tongue. Heck, both Devil Survivor 1 and 2 had Auriok, and those games didn't even have M ratings. If it's really too much to show a male, just color it green or something. What I think would really do him justice is if they were to bring him back for Persona 5 The Royal. It would be perfect if they're planning to bring back Nyarlathotep for the Royal. But even if Cthulhu doesn't have a story role, having him as a Persona would be pretty awesome. Atlas, if there's a demon that absolutely needs to come back in the next game, it's Cthulhu. I know you guys can make it happen. Well guys, that is it for the video. I hope you all enjoyed, and be sure to tell me what you all think. Tell me if there are any I missed too, because I'm curious to see what other underused demons there are. Before I end the video though, I just want to get one quick announcement out of the way. For those of you that are going to Anime Week in Atlanta, my panel got approved. I'm going to be running the Megami Tensei and Persona panel. It's going to be on Saturday, November 2nd from 3 to 4 p.m. at the Cobb Galleria Center in room 102. I also might be doing a fan meetup there. It depends whether or not I can get enough people. But if you're going to be at Anime Week in Atlanta, you can just hit me up on Discord, or if you're there and you see a short, skinny guy cosplaying as Katsuya or Tatsuya, it's probably me. I know I'm going to be going to the rave, might be going to a few panels here and there, but yeah, it's going to be fun. Oh, and one more thing, 10,000 Punishments for Sin is getting ready to release their Megami Tensei fan book. It's a collection of fan art, cosplays, and other Megami Tensei related stuff. I'll have a link to their website in the description, so be sure to check them out. Anyways guys, that is it for the video. Be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, I will see you all later.